Hello everybody, welcome back to ComedIan MTG. I'm your host Ian. Last week, cEDH Titans Playing with Power had another one of their patron online webcam tournaments, and they had a top 4 from that tournament, which I'm going to break down for you today. The first player in our top 4 today is Raymondo, and they were playing Pongo's classic primer, Warrior Queen, the cEDH Najeela list. Now this is the exact same 100 cards that are on the cEDH deck list database primer. And if you'll notice, there are sort of two camps happening right now in the world of playing Najeela. There is the Deafening Silence camp and the Ad Nauseam camp. So some lists are trying to be a little more lean, running things like Ad Nauseam, and the other ones are trying to have a bit more of a mid-range game, playing things like Deafening Silence. Now, lately, a lot more of the Deafening Silence variants of Najeela have been the ones putting up numbers. So it's very interesting to see that this version, Pongo's version, is one of the lists playing Ad Nauseam. Now, when I was flipping through this list, because I haven't checked it in a little bit, I'm very interested to see the fact that they're playing Fire Covenant and Ad Nauseam in the same list. Now, for those who are used to seeing Najeela, Fire Covenant is a really strong card, and a very strong card in Najeela because providing a one-sided board wipe when commanders win conditions really care about having an open player to be able to attack. Fire Covenant is obviously a strong piece in that scenario because you want to be able to wipe your opponent's boards and leave your own boards completely unaffected. The win conditions in this list are the standard win conditions of Nature's Will, which will allow you to untap your lands when you attack with Najeela, therefore taking infinite combats. You can also do this with Derevi, Imperial Tactician. Now, way back in the day, people were playing Druid's Repository, but it seems that that has sort of fallen out of favor because it's just kind of unnecessary in the list when you have Nature's Will and Derevi already. On top of that, as I mentioned, you're playing Ad Nauseam and Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pack combined with Thassa's Oracle. Obviously, a 5-color deck in this format is probably going to play those cards. Now, I will say this is definitely not the most insane Ad Nauseam deck. I assume that there are many scenarios, seeing as there's only 6 artifacts in this list, that there are definitely going to be times in which you don't really pop off with your Ad Nauseams, which is why I feel like this is much more of an end step Ad Naus deck. Definitely some new tech here in Tinderwall and Ragavan. I think that the list is obviously very clean. You get to play 5 colors, you get to play some of the best cards in those 5 colors, so it's very cool to see this list do well. Najeela is obviously one of the more powerful cards in the format, and not surprising to see top 4 placement from Najeela. Speaking of a top 4 placement from Najeela, we have a Najeela hybrid by Strick28. Also known as VT. This is, as I was referring to before, the Deafening Silence variant. They are also playing Fire Covenant and Ad Nauseam in the Deafening Silence variant, which I think is really bold. Obviously, Ad Naus and Deafening Silence kind of contradicting at times, but if you are, once again, doing that end step Ad Nauseam, it doesn't really have as much of a downside as trying to do it in the middle of the main phase and win with Najeela that way. I'm also very interested in the fact that this list is playing Collector Oof and Phantasmal Image for the Dockside in this list. Now, as I mentioned, there's only 6 artifacts in the list, but having a Dockside and an Oof in the deck can definitely create some awkward scenarios. I definitely can see why it's like worth it to play Oof and Dockside. One Oof really just pantses the meta right now. So I guess this is kind of why we're seeing this called a hybrid list, because we have pieces from the sort of mid-range Najeela list, which are like Oof and Deafening Silence and Fire Covenant, although that's now in the Ad Naus variant. But we're also seeing pieces like Thassa's Oracle, Consultation, and Dockside, with Phantasmal Image having the ability to like copy and bounce your Dockside, playing things like Snap too. So it's interesting to see the balance of this list. I tend to not like too many contradictive pieces, but clearly this list performed well over the weekend. Apart from that, very similar to the other lists. It's really only like 5 or 6 slots different between the two Najeela lists. Najeela is one of those decks that you really get to just play some of the best stuff in the format, so there's not really a ton of need to expand into the space. It's really just, taking the silver bullet pieces, things like Deafening Silence, things like Oof, things like Fire Covenant, and deciding which one of those pieces you think is the most necessary for the deck at the time. One thing we can do right now is to go over to the compare tool that Moxfield has. So I can take the Warrior Queen, which is Pongo's list, and then compare it to this Najeela hybrid list and see how many cards are actually different. Yeah, so 8 cards different. Warrior Queen is playing Noxious, Pyroblast, Wild Growth, Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, Unsubstantiate, Summoner's Pact, and Rejuvenating Springs, whereas the hybrid list is playing Spell Pierce, Llanowar, Collector Oof, Deafening Silence, Plateau, Finale of Devastation, Toski, and Douthie Voidwalker. So you can see the difference between the two lists really accentuated here. This list is definitely playing the ability to have a bit more of a stacks and or grind option, whereas Warrior Queen's kind of going for these really lean pieces. You know, the highest CMC here is unsub with 2 mana, and that's usually like bounce your own dockside or stop an opposing spell. Now this next list is super unique and very, very cool. We have Veryon here, also known as Durdler on Moxfield, with a list that they actually sent me a couple days beforehand, and I was like, wow, this is wild. How has it been testing? And apparently it had been testing very well, and obviously when it was practically applied at the Playing with Power tournament, it ended up making the top 4. This is a Keskit the Flesh Sculptor and Tana the Bloodsower list. It is called Jund Doomsday. Now, there's a lot happening in here. As you can see from the name of the list, you use Keskit to sack 3 either artifacts or creatures and basically pop your Doomsday pile. So I've seen, when I was talking to Veryon, like the piles that were often brought up were things like you get Witherbloom Apprentice, Reanimate, and you get Chain of Smog. So then you're able to go, okay, I'm gonna dump my Witherbloom into the graveyard, I'm gonna cast Reanimate on it, and then I have my Chain of Smog in hand to kill the table. And there's apparently a lot of really cool 3-card piles that you can crack. There's also lines in this deck with Reanimating Razaketh. It sort of has this hybrid of a Reanimator strategy and this black-green sort of go big strategy. So you are playing Peer into the Abyss and Razaketh, but you're not playing Ad Nauseam, which makes sense because you're playing Peer into the Abyss and Razaketh. As I mentioned, there's the whole Doomsday plan. You do need your commander out for the Doomsday plan. There's also the backup plan of having your Twin Flame Dualcaster Mage Loop, and I'm not sure what the exact Doomsday piles are for that. But this is just like a super unique deck list, and it's really, really cool. I also like the synergy that Tana is actually able to hit your opponents and make Saprolings so that you can sacrifice them to Keskit. I've just never thought of Keskit in a cEDH context before I saw this list, and I never thought that it would be used to be a Doomsday pile cracker, and definitely not a Doomsday pile cracker in Sans Blue. Like, this deck is just super, super cool. Apart from that, just playing like a lot of Jund good stuff cards, right? Like you have all your tutor packages, you have sort of like equivalent to the Nas loops. This deck is also playing Grinding Station Underworld Breach as a loop you can play, and it's also playing some really interesting artifacts, which I think is pretty cool. It's playing Defense Grid, which, you know, if you've kind of been around the block with certain turbo strategies, Defense Grid has been a card that's floated around a lot, especially when you don't have white to be able to cast things like Silence. Conqueror's Flail is a really interesting card because it basically, when you equip it to something, it becomes a Grand Abolisher effect. So it's one of those things when you're playing a very proactive deck like this, you can really just sort of steal a game with a Conqueror's Flail on the battlefield, especially if you're able to resolve the flail early on, and then your opponents, when you're actually about to pop off, aren't ready for you to just go, okay, I'm going to equip it, and then they can't interact on your turn anymore. Vexing Shusher has similar effects in the game, and also has the benefit of not being able to be countered itself. Yeah, this is just a really cool list, and I love seeing brewing like this in cEDH because I've literally heard 0 things before I saw this list about Keskit the Flesh Sculptor, and now it is not only a deck, but a deck that top forward a webcam tournament from a reasonably large size demographic. It's like really cool. It's just, I love seeing new decks in this format. I love seeing what people can come up with, the creativity to be explored here. Recently on Twitter, I was talking with Brayden, my old co-host from the cEDH cast, about how, like, I wonder how many commanders are set to the side because people haven't looked at them in the context of cEDH in the right way. And obviously this is a perfect example of that, with Keskit just being a Doomsday pile cracker and a very unique card, and combined with Tana to really pull out that synergy in this deck. And obviously having the Jund colors being just like really powerful colors in the format right now just helps make this whole plan kind of come together. It's super cool. I love to see it. Here comes my pride and joy of this whole event, Mr. Bruse, who is not only a Winota pilot, but someone I know personally, someone I got to spend a lot of time with at Tier 1 Con. Mr. Bruse took Winota Snowball Stacks, my exact 100 cards in the primer, to the #1 finish in this entire tournament, and I am I'm just so excited that Winota took down a tournament. I'm so excited that someone I know took down this tournament with a list that I absolutely love. And he's been playing the deck a lot lately, and he's been playing the tech really, really well lately. And I'm just so excited to see this list do well in this tournament. For those who don't know, your deck really is just built around your commander, Winota. Winota is luckily in bad colors, but also still kind of broken, because anytime you attack with a non-human, you look at the top 6, you can put a human in tapped and attacking onto the battlefield, and it gets indestructible until the end of the turn. And basically the entire point of the deck is to lay out some early non-humans, some of them probably with stacks effects, attack in and get just a ridiculous amount of value. You don't need traditional card advantage, so you play crazy things like Spirit of Labyrinth, which stop your opponents drawing extra cards on their turn. You get to play all of the Rule of Law effects. You get to play Deafening Silence, all of those things, Archon of Emeria, Eidolon of Rhetoric, etc., etc. You get to play Thalia effects because there are 47 creatures in this list, which is just, I love that I get to say I built a deck with 47 creatures in this format. But yeah, Mr. Bruse has been absolutely killing it with this list. He was actually doing really well at Tier 1 Con and just sort of had some bad breaks at the end and didn't make the top 16, but still did very, very well. So we had a Winota in the top 16 of Tier 1 Con, and now we have a Winota list winning the Playing with Power second webcam patron tournament. And man, I'm just so happy to see the deck doing so well. It's super awesome. Winota's such a unique commander. It's amazing to see a Boros list not only cEDH playable, but cEDH successful, I guess would be the way to say it. And I think a lot of people have seen this list as something that they've seen it as something playable, but not something that is worth considering in the higher tiers of the format. And I'm starting to hear the conversation around that change a bit. I think that if you want to be playing a stacks list in this format and you want to be successful with it, I think Winota's one of the best options. And I love that all the hard work put into this list, not only by myself, but in the Discord community and all of these lists is being paid off here. And it's super cool once again to see a friend to do so well in this tournament. Good day for Winota. All right, everybody, that concludes our top 4 breakdown from Playing with Power's second patron webcam tournament. It was a really cool tournament to watch. I will leave a link in the description of the finals of that match. It was actually a really fun match to watch. I was definitely watching it live and talking a ton in chat because I was so excited to see not only Winota but Veryon playing the Jund Doomsday list. It was a really awesome top 4. I'm so happy to members of the ComedIan MTG Discord made this top 4 and performed really well. There's a lot of really awesome brewing happening in the Discord, and like I do in every episode, I'll leave a link to the ComedIan MTG Discord in the description. The members of the Discord have just been doing really well lately, and I'm super happy and super proud as a creator to see people I know and I'm associated with just like doing so well in these tournaments. And the Discord has become like a really awesome brewing space, and I'm so happy because that's all I've ever wanted it to be. All right, everybody, one last reminder, if you liked videos like this, please hit like and subscribe. Hit that little bell icon if you want notifications when we release stuff. And if you want to go that extra mile, help pay for things like equipment, and you want to get benefits like access to secret channels on the Discord, your name in the show notes, a database of decks that I brewed, or even your decks featured on the show, check us out over at patreon.com/ComedIanMTG. All right, everybody, have an amazing week. Peace.